Good morning.
Morning. Sorry, I was muted.
That's all right. I got the slides about 8 o'clock, 8:30 last night.
Saw that. Looks like Gene Putman's on with us here.
Yeah. Anybody
Yep,
else? Yeah.
No, that's it. Yeah, I saw those slides and I've put them in here and should be.
We'll see what kind of feedback we get on those slides today, and we can make adjustments for tomorrow's meeting.
Sounds like a plan, I guess.
Thanks for making those corrections.
Of course.
Morning.
Morning. How's it going?
Pretty good. Just rolling along. Every day seems to kind of blend together at this point. Same routine over and
Yep.
over. It's like Groundhog Day,
It is.
except for not funny, but looks like we're matching. We have glasses and a red shirt on.
Yeah. A little early for contacts.
I've kind of given up on mine. There's not really much of a point right now unless I'm doing some kind of activity. Just trying to save them. Here comes Joyce.
Hey, Joyce.
How's everybody?
Oh, good.
Seems like
Good.
we just did this.
Yeah, it does seem like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Let's see. Oh, I guess. All right. It seems like NADA's got a real small agenda tomorrow.
Well, it looks like a small agenda. At SPC, we had an hour's conversation about the reimagine.
Oh, really?
So that should take up most of the time, I would think.
Yeah.
What's happening? I mean, what are they saying?
Just frustration that none of the buses that are gonna stay, none of the service is up in the north, that when anybody that's a north area representative either on the TAC or on the advisory committee asked to speak, they don't get recognized, that they get kind of
Right.
to the side. It's just an exercise in frustration, and particularly since no one's riding the buses anyway.
Right.
to spend all this time and effort trying to figure out how the service is going to be reconfigured for Reimagine seems like a waste of time and effort. So if it's a short meeting, that'll be great. I don't suspect it will be a short meeting, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I sat in the Reimagine meeting the other day, and they threw out exactly what you just kind of said, that they're looking at all the bus schedules and they're going to consolidate some of them. And, and really, it goes to the end ride. I mean, if there's not a bus to pick these riders up eventually, what, they're not going to use it. And they're not going to use it anyway at this point, I don't think. But hey, Troy, how are you? I think you're muted.
God, I'm frustrated when I'm muted. That blow a gasket.
I know. It's just frustrating. Everything is. I know.
That was quite a public comment section at RTD last night. I don't know if you endured it.
My wonderful husband brought the phone up to me while I was cooking dinner and made me listen to that. It was just horrendous.
What happened?
It's just one RTD member monopolizing RTD's meetings and having her supporters and friends and malcontents sign up to talk and take hours of RTD's time. I don't know how you curtail that. I think Angie tries, but it's a very difficult thing to curtail someone and not look like you're being heavy-handed and not allowing them to have their,
Even though two of her people got to talk twice, and yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem looking at Allied, but you can't just go in there and defund it and not have a plan for handling the short term, because there's a couple drivers says, I don't need psychiatrists, I need armed guards, and boy, that group doesn't want to hear it. But it was interesting. But we got our budget adjustments made to get through 2020 and set us up a little better in 2021 than we had anticipated back in April and May. So a little bit of good news, but not much really.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is good news, I guess,
Once again, I have a board meeting, and we have a huge room up in our Carbon Valley area, so we're able to meet in person, but it's a capacity about 300. So there's 11 board members and 10 staff or so, and so we spread out, yell at each other through masks, but it works. But so again, I'll have to depart a few, probably at 8:45 or so, but trying to make it work. Unfortunately, we have this conflict over and over.
Thanks, Troy. We appreciate you coming. I mean, we really need your voice.
Well, I always learn something. It's more selfish probably on my part, because, you get different viewpoints and some other discussions that are pretty important in the RTD role and even in my regular job,
Yep, I know. Karen, or do we have anybody else coming? Do we know?
The only one I've heard from is Emily Atencio, who says she won't be able to join us, and you've got 5 board members.
Okay, all right.
You probably ought to get started, and if we have to defer approvals, we can defer approvals. I don't see
Right.
the rest of the crew on here.
Okay, so
Ken or Kyle or, yeah.
So we're short how many people for a quorum? Just so I know what to jump over,
Trying to think what we're down to. I think we're down to 10 people and we have 5.
Okay.
So I think we need one more.
One more? All right. Let's get going though, because all of our time is scheduled. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Smart Commute board meeting. Seems like we were just here yesterday. But let's go, just for my sake, because I can only see a small grouping at a time. We'll go around and just kind of, maybe Karen, you call out who's here, or let's see.
You bet. So we've got Karen Stewart, Carson, Joyce Downing, Paul Martinez is here now. We have a quorum.
Okay.
Jean, Jessica. Let's see what else I've got here. Hang on.
Okay,
Rhiannon, Tammy, Troy Whitmore.
cool. All right.
I see Kyle on the phone too. I don't know if
Oh,
he's-
you do see Kyle on the phone? I don't see him on here. Oh, here he is.
I'm
See him.
on.
Yep.
I
Hi,
don't see me
Kyle.
there. Well, let's
Hi
see.
there.
There he is.
All right, he snuck in. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay, let's move forward for approval of the June minutes. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at them? Any changes to the June minutes?
Yeah, this is Kyle. I actually do have
Or,
one
or
change.
May minutes, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah, this is-
what's June? It's the June minutes.
Is it the June minutes?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
look at your screen, it's approval of June minutes. That was,
Okay. You know what I did is I printed the other
Yeah.
minutes. It's okay. All right. Okay, so,
I do have a change.
all right.
This is Kyle. Yeah, it was just in the McWhinney section. I think there was a comment that said that all of the hotels except for one were closed permanently. Good news is they're not closing permanently.
oh, good.
They just closed during the COVID piece and have since reopened.
Okay, good. We'll make that change.
Yep, thanks.
Anyone else have concerns about the minutes? All right, can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Okay,
And
A
who's
second?
that? You'll have to tell us who you are when you speak.
Yeah, sure thing. This is Rhiannon. Motion
Oh,
to
good.
approve.
Okay, Kyle second.
all right.
Okay,
All in-
that's motion to approve with correction. Yeah.
There you, thank you. Okay, how about all opposed? None? All right, that'll make it easier for you. I heard silence. All right, so I will accept the minutes as approved. Okay, what about the July's treasurer report?
Okay, I'll make some quick observations here.
Okay,
Memberships are really slow. We only got one in. We got the Amazon money in, and then we got Graham renewal. There's still 4 of the original first quarter bills out there that haven't been paid. And then I have 6 more that'll go out this week. That's the second half of the year. We'll see what happens with those. It's not looking good. We're not spending very much money. The office supplies that we are paying for is obviously paper and ink for our computers. And the only mileage reimbursement I'm paying for is Jean Shreve, who is on site at the 144th Flex Ride. The rest of the crew is not turning in mileage, obviously. And then our current balance is down to 28,800, but we have a lot of outstanding invoices that will be coming in. FlexRide June invoice is 4,600, and I have 2 local matches, the 15,000 for Thornton and 15,000 for Westminster for 2020. I haven't got the St. Anthony membership renewal money yet, and we have the June CMAC for 9,000. So it's one of those cash flow things again. And one of the issues for us, of course, is everybody is running into reduced revenues, whether it's a business or a government or an employer. Everybody's looking at their budget and saying, oh, can we really stand to be philanthropic at this time? What do we really get for those $2,000 or $5,000 if they're a 5,000 member? And so we'll keep you in the loop, but we've tightened our belts, and we're we have some set costs like insurance and taxes, payroll taxes, our web support, those kinds of things. The good news is that ACT conference, which usually costs us about $700 each or $800 each, is down to $195 this year, so that won't be a big cost. And that particular expense is reimbursed at 80% from our CMAC grant. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the treasurer's report.
Questions? No questions? Okay. All right. I maybe next month it's worth a conversation about the membership dues and how we move forward though, Karen.
Yeah, I'd love to have anybody's ideas of how do I extract, blood from a turnip.
Right.
Be happy to take any suggestions anyone has. We have in fact gone after a couple of grants that we didn't get. So we're looking everywhere we can. We're just one of many nonprofits that are getting their funding cut from our members.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So we need a motion to accept.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So do I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report for July?
So moved.
A second?
Seconded. This is Rhiannon.
Okay, thank you, Rihanna. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes. Okay. Our update on the office space.
Thanks very much. So as you know, we've been anticipating having to leave our office for a while now, and I know Bo's on the line. We heard from Adams County that August 1st they'd like us to be out. So Tammy and Carson and I have been moving our office into my garage. We have a lot of swag that we bought in anticipation of doing public outreach this year and community outreach. And so a lot of that is just stuff that we'll eventually give out to people, but it takes up some room. We've all been working from home. We'll continue to work from home. We do that fine. We'll probably occasionally have an in-person meeting over at my house. I have a large patio and we can socially distance pretty easily out there. We've talked about doing that maybe for the next meeting that we have. We do a staff meeting every Friday. It's worked out pretty well. I think I sent all of you a note saying we need some office space, and City of Northland kindly got back to us and said, hey, we have some space. Why don't you come look at it? And if you want it, we can talk about getting you in here. The caveat is that they're going to build a new city building, but there's nothing that's got an estimated time on that. And so if we take that space, we might eventually have to move again. We don't need the space probably till the first of the year. So I really appreciate Joyce, you reaching out to Heather, your city manager, and she reached out to me and I told her I'd get back to her after I had a board meeting. I think it'll work out fine. I talked to Bo, and Bo said that we can use the new ACREP office's address over there at Community Reach Center. So we have a physical address that can be consistent. There'll be people over at ACREP, so we can pick up our mail over there. Some of our grants don't allow us to have a PO box, and I hesitate to use my home address for all of that business mail that we get, change all that business mail. So that sounds like we can do that. And then what else was I going to say about that? Oh, so our smart commute meetings probably continue to just hold them on Zoom. It seems to work fine. There's really no reason for all of us to drive to a location unless we do a retreat or something like that. And for NADA, we can use a large conference room probably over at Community Reach Center once we go back to doing things in person. We're really looking to the guidance of Tri-State or Tri-County Health and also Adams County to determine when we can go back to doing things in person. There's probably no rush to doing that. I'm not sure that there's a downside to not meeting in person, at least right now. And when we go back to doing it in person, then we'll look for the space that could accommodate this board and then the NADA meetings. The NADA meetings generally get, I think our last NADA meeting had 50 people. So much larger space need for that than for our board meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions about office update. We think we'll be out by August 1st. We've made a couple of trips and we'll go back over there and finish it up this coming week.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay. All right. Well, and I'm glad that Heather reached out to you. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. So it's an opportunity. It's a place. It's a space, and the way things are going right now, everything is up in the air as far as possibly moving. It'll be 3 or 4 years before that would even happen. So I mean, at least you would have that physical space for a while, so, and it's empty over there, so.
It's a great location for us.
Yeah.
It's close to where we'd like to be. And two of our, Tammy lives in Thornton and Kit lives in North Glen. And I'm not far from there, and Carson has to come from wherever he's going to end up buying a house anyway. He doesn't know for sure where he's going to live. So it's really a great location for us, and we appreciate that generous offer.
Sure. Okay. We'll see what happens in the future here.
Yeah.
Next, have the Flex Ride.
I'll take this one. I think it's important that we give you a Flex Ride update. You're hearing all the bad news about ridership being down, and so this is just a little update that was put together by our consultant. We just want to remind you of the grant funding. All of this is stuff that you know probably by heart now. 4-year grant, $2 million grant. It's an 80-20 split. 400,000 in local match. That's 100,000 every year that we require to find some money for. And you can see that it's we're asking each of the major employers over there for $5K a year. That's something we've talked about. That's still a big struggle for us, but Gina is working hard on trying to control the employers over there. If we have Amazon and St. Anthony, that means we need about 2 more to come to the table with $5,000, or 3 to come to the table with 2,000. So, all right, next slide, please. We just want to remind you of the Flex Ride route, and it runs Monday through Saturday, usually about a 20-minute bus connection. It's interesting because Carson and I did an outreach over at 120X. It's part of, I suppose I'm diverting here, but it's part of RTD's effort to get people back on buses, and they've done outreaches at a lot of the park and rides, and handed out masks and sanitizers to people riding the buses. We were there at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning at the 120 park and ride, and buses that used to have standing room only going down into Denver for commuter purposes had 5 people. Another bus 5 minutes later had 8 people. Another 5 minutes later had 6 people. Just not a very big ridership increase from COVID concerns. But what was interesting was every single bus had somebody wanting to get on the Flex Ride to come up to 144. And each of those Flex Ride buses now are restricted to 5 people per bus because of being passenger bus. So we were kind of surprised that people were still riding the main buses, the commuter buses, to get up to Wagon Road and then taking Wagon Road flex ride from 140 up to 144. So we know that people are using that, and we'll show you in a minute the slide that shows the frequency of that. During COVID, when RTD reduced travel times, we were reduced as well. We didn't do any of that in the middle of the day on demand, but you can see what that service area is. And if you look at this before you turn it, you know, it's not just Orchard Town Center and Amazon. And this Orchard Park Place is where Sierra Trading is, and PetSmart, and some of those little restaurant and retail, Chick-fil-A, all of those. And then the Grove, which is, you know, where we've got just north of Cabela's and the Denver Premium Outlet. But then if you go on down, the Lowe's is down there. The Lowe's is down on 136, and we're getting some, you know, business from Lowe's as well. So, all right, next slide. So here's the FlexDrive data, and it kind of shows you, well, it does in fact show you the frequency. I think it's kind of interesting. If you notice, for DEN 3, ridership increased during the initial period of COVID for essential workers to get to work. So if you're looking at, you know, at March, April, May, June, you look at the number of pickups, they've escalated substantially, and drop-offs, you know, pretty substantial. Based on employment at DEN 3 is 3,600. Base employment at DEN 3 is 3,600, but by June there were 4,600 employees there. And you know, when we first started with DEN 3, I think there were like 2,500 employees. So now we're up to 4,600 employees. And for Denver Premium Outlets and the Grove, ridership clearly decreased. And that's because they were non-essential workers, and many of the workers at Denver Premium Outlets in the Grove were retail related, which were not allowed to be open. So you can see that reflected in the numbers. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah. Good number of the Orchard Town Center trips are quite diverse, showing riders are getting used to using the shuttle service around the interchange. So for going from one point of the west side of I-25 to the east side of I-25, or the south side of 144th to the north side of 144th, and so on. For instance, prior to COVID, Jean says they started experiencing a small uptick in non-work trips, such as shopping trips to America's Best Optical, Macy's, Hot Topic, and there's been an interesting pattern forming between Target and DEN 3 and Little Monkey Business and DEN 3, possibly showing people who either work at both locations or needing to run errands or get a bit to eat before they work at DEN 3. I think it's interesting that there are some people that are probably working shift work at DEN 3 and then also taking extra work at one of these retail businesses as well on the other side. And then another area seeing small but increasing ridership is over at Orchard Park Place on the southwest corner of 144th, and that's that one we just called out. They're seeing people being picked up and dropped off at the Marriott over there, Costa Vida, Chick-fil-A, Sierra, PetSmart, Sugar for Steakhouse. And then they think these are important. Jean says she thinks these are important to note because it shows 144 Flex Ride is starting to be used for primarily all types of trips, not just essential workforce trips. And people are also combining trips around the interchange, even during COVID. And they're also encouraged increased ridership to Lowe's Shopping Center off of 136 and Orchard Parkway in June, and we believe that's essential workers using that service. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've partnered with, we don't get any money out of this, but we certainly get good use of it. The Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council, Dr. MAC as it's called, is really an agency like DRCOG. And they work primarily to provide mobility for people who are in vulnerable populations or at risk or elderly. They get a number of funding opportunities that we don't get because they do a different thing than we do as mobility options. But they managed to get a partnership with Uber to provide 2,500 free rides in the Denver metro region. And they called us and said, hey, can you use any of these free rides up here? And we said, absolutely. So Jean got involved with that. And the Flex Ride was one of several opportunities that could distribute free tickets to help individuals with transportation challenges. And really were targeted to essential employees needing to get to and from work. And maybe elderly, critical trips for grocery or medical, probation, housing appointments, that sort of thing. And the way this worked is they had to contact us and we had to get a code and give it to them. The trips were up to $25 in value. Anything beyond that $25, they had to pay themselves. But a lot of them using this didn't have to pay anything because their trip was within that $25 range. And they knew that ahead of time of taking the trip. And so Jean coordinated all of that and kept statistics on all of that. And we probably used 1,000 vouchers, which gave us 855 trips throughout the course of the program. The program just ended June 30th. And some of the benefits really was the ability for someone to be able to work an extra shift because if the RTD service couldn't pick them up, they could use Uber to get home. Or downtown when RTD had to close their service because it wasn't safe for their drivers or their passengers, people used Uber to get back downtown if they lived downtown and needed to get up to this area. And then Jean said they often combined codes to run multiple errands. So they would get to the bus, they take the bus, they take the Flex Ride, and then they would use Uber to get somewhere else and back in order to get back to work. And the other thing that's not listed here, I think that's important to say, is it provided some service on Sunday when RTD doesn't have any service. There's no Sunday service. And employees still have shift work to do on Sundays. So those Uber codes were pretty interesting, the uses. And Jean's compiling a survey that tells what did they use it for? Where did they go? What demographic are they part of? Just to give us an idea. And she's also working with Uber to see if there's some way that we can buy a reduced service from them in order to continue this program. Instead of working through Dr. Mack, would they work with us directly? They might have got some COVID funding at Uber to do this, I'm not sure. But anyway, we're pursuing all of that. It was a great experience for us. It's interesting because when Kate, who runs Dr. Matt, called me and asked if we could use any of these Uber codes, she had offered them to Adams County Health and Human Services, and they said, no, they didn't need them. And so she said, what about you guys? Do you guys need them? And we said, yeah, we'll find a use for them. So that was great for us. It was a great program. Jean said she continues to get calls from people saying, hey, do you have any more of those Uber ride codes that we can use? And of course the program's over, but it was a great experiment. Glad we were part of it. So that's our update on Flex Ride, and I can try to answer any questions that you might have. If I don't have the answers, I'll ask Jean and she'll get back to you.
So Karen, this is Kyle. I've got a question on the Flex Rides, and I was wondering if perhaps you could put the numbers in context. It's certainly encouraging to see that the number of folks utilizing the service appears to be increasing now that we're, I don't know if you call it going back to work, but whatever phase in life we're in right now. Do those numbers, are those, when we originally decided to do the program, do those numbers, are they meeting projections? Do we even have projections? Are they less than what we thought, but oh, by the way, we're in a COVID environment? Are they greater than what we thought we were going to do? Can you just provide a little context for those? And then I guess the second question is, are we evaluating the effectiveness of this program sort of looking at it on a short term versus long term, because boy, I'd hate to make any long-term decisions about a program given we're in such a bizarre environment right now. It seems like any data we get is going to be skewed by, I mean, and just by way of example, I work, officially work downtown. I went to the office on Monday. I was one of 5 people in there. Typically we have 80 people in the office. Now that everyone's required to wear masks in the office, nobody's going downtown. It's dead. And so again, I would just hate for us to be making decisions on what could be a really good program in an environment that is not indicative of what we will ultimately be when we come out of it.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to attempt an answer to that. The numbers, of course, don't hit what we projected. And one of the reasons we projected a better use was because there would be, we based it on the existing route service that RTD had. And when RTD cut that route service for COVID, the connections weren't there. So people who would have used it don't use it. We also assumed that people would be going to retail outlets, Denver premium outlets and restaurants, and maybe use the Flex Ride in a series of connections. So if somebody important wanted to take the park ride to Wagon Road and then, or take the Thornton shuttle to Wagon Road and then take the Flex Ride up, they'd have a chain of connections, and nobody's going to restaurants yet, or very few people are going to restaurants yet. So in context, it's not doing the numbers that we thought it would do, but what's really been interesting is it's the only option out there for some essential workers. And we can see that there's a population, a demographic that really is transit dependent. Some of the people using this are elderly people who are trying to get to their doctor's appointments. It's interesting because the diversity, and I can get a report for next month on the diversity of the types of people who are using this, not just Amazon workers, but people who are visiting at St. Anthony North, and they're there with a patient. Patients have surgery and they're staying maybe at that Marriott over there. And they use that to get over to the Four Corners to get something to eat or to go to Target or that kind of thing. Obviously, you can walk over there in the underpass, but people are taking this trip. The other thing was, it was free for a while when RTD stopped charging temporarily during COVID because they needed people to enter in the back. There was no cost to do this, and so we'll look at the long-term effects of that. We have a 4-year grant, and it's funded for 4 years through the feds. It will really be determined by RTD whether they continue to do these flex rides or not, and ours would fall under that. Should our contract with RTD, and because of some policy decision that they evaluate and say we just can't afford to do flex rides anymore, our program will go away too, and our obligation will be gone. Nobody anticipated this, obviously, when we took on a 4-year project like this. The cost to us is minimal compared to the cost of running the service. And one of the reasons we were so eager to do this was to get ridership established at 144th, because we were always told there's no need for it up there. And we're told there's no need for it up at Highway 7. We're told that all the time. And our efforts were to get this going for a couple of years and then pursue one for Highway 7, pursue something for Highway 7, so that we can keep moving that transit needle northward. You all are paying into this system. Larkridge has been paying into this system for 20 years and never had any service. So one of our strategies, of course, in doing this was not only to provide service for Amazon and St. Anthony North and others, but was to move the needle of ridership north and establish a need and have some data to prove that, there's a need for the use up here. But I agree with you. We don't want to make long-term decisions based on hopefully what we hope will be a more short-term challenge.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, Karen, how about the end line update?
I guess it's mine too. The only reason these are all mine is because Carson thought he had to get married and take, a 3-week honeymoon. And so I did all his work. It was tough.
It's not fair.
It's got, just teasing you, but really.
Priorities.
I know he got married. There's a ring on his finger. That's the only reason. Or he could have just pretended to get married and take 3 weeks off. I don't know.
Oh,
Who knows?
yeah, he's
so-
smiling.
Yeah.
Okay.
A quick inline update on, I'm not going to give you a construction update because we're being told that the construction is going full guns. It's going to be open. Troy could probably speak to that. I think you're checking all this stuff on the boxes, right, Troy? It's moving forward as anticipated.
Yeah, we really didn't have any hiccups or changes mentioned last night by Mr. Ballard. Things are going well. Inspections are going well. So, knock on wood, if we clear the last couple hurdles, we should be rocking and rolling on the 21st. So, yeah, we're happy, albeit 2.5, 3 years late, but at least we're going to see, a product that hopefully we can use and will grow. We are definitely going to be at 30-minute headways, which we'd fought for 20, but everybody's at 30 on commuter rail due to the ridership and COVID issues. So we were assured that we will be, considered when appropriate to go back to the 20s, which, another train an hour is very helpful when things pick up. But yeah, full speed ahead.
Great. So I'll tell you a little bit about the station area opening and the parties. Typically there's a big VIP party before the station opens, and then there's a official ribbon cutting, and then that's usually Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday is the big station area parties, and then for a week you get free ridership. This year's going to be a little different. No VIP parties. The official opening will be on a Monday, which will be Monday, September 21st. The run boards for the services for all of RTD change on the 20th of September, and so they're basing this on the day after the run boards change, and that's the service boards with changes and connections to the north. So 8 o'clock on Monday morning the 21st, dignitaries, the board, and others will get on the train at Denver Union Station, and they'll do ribbon cuttings at a station in each of the jurisdictions, not every station. So it'll start at Denver Union Station, and then we'll go to the Western Stock Show and do a ribbon cutting there with the dignitaries from Denver. The next stop will be at Commerce City, and they'll do a ribbon cutting there with the dignitaries from Commerce City. The next stop will be the 88th, and the Thornton City Council dignitaries will do a ribbon cutting there, and then a stop at 112th for North Glen. The dignitaries will do a cutting there, and then around 10 o'clock it should end up that they'll do the end of line ribbon cutting at East Lake with dignitaries there, and at that point they'll do a commemorative plaque. At each of these stops there's artwork that have been done, and each of the communities have mentioned that they'd really like to be able to acknowledge the artists and have a display of the artwork. RTD is not encouraging us to have any station area parties. They think that we'll still be required to be socially distanced, and for example, on each of the ribbon cuttings, they'd like to have a list of dignitaries in RSVPs ahead of time, and they want to keep it down to about 15 people. 15 people on the platform in addition, I think, to the board, whoever the board members are. And they're at the station area end of line. They don't want people to congregate before 10 o'clock in the morning. So we're part of a inner task force that works with the city of Thornton and Northland and Commerce City and Denver with their designated staff people to talk about what these station area plans are going to be. And I suspect that there'll be some information about that in the next meeting, which is, I think, next week maybe. And we offered as Smart Commute, you know, we did G-Line last year with help from Rhiannon and others. It was just a fabulous party. We're not going to do a party like that this year. But in anticipation of parties last year, we bought 600 of those bottles that have the N-Line logo on them to give away. We used our marketing money last year for that. And so we've offered that to each of the jurisdictions for their stations that are doing the ribbon cutting. And we'll give them those bottles to disperse at those ribbon cuttings. They have the RTD logo on it, the N-Line, you know, train on it, and then it has Smart Commute on it too. So it's good marketing for us. But that's really what we've had so far. We anticipate changes as we move forward, depending on what the governor says and depending on what Tri-County Health says. You know, we may be constrained to having a virtual ribbon cutting is one of the things that the marketing department has told us. So we'll let you know as soon as we know. And that's really.
Karen, I have a question. I don't know if you know, or Troy, maybe you'll know. What's the capacity on the trains right now? Obviously, things can change in September, but what is the overall capacity?
You know, Jessica, I was told that, and I just can't recall at this point. So I wouldn't even hazard a guess, but we can certainly get that.
That's okay. I mean, I think
Sorry.
everybody understands the situation. It's unfortunate, but it's not really a surprise. I'll actually be surprised if we can still do it in person.
Yeah.
Just knowing that September is when that flu season starts, and likely that's when the second wave will hit.
Mhm.
So at this point, like Troy said, I think we're just thrilled that it's going to be open at all, and
Yeah.
we'll do what we can to celebrate it in any way we can. So
Mhm.
yeah. But I
Yeah,
guess
good
knowing how
point.
many people could ride the train even after the grand opening day would be something to at least let the public know. Even,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm sure they will, but I will, I'll get that number today and get it back out. If nothing
And
else,
obviously that'll probably change, so I get it.
yeah, it's odd and interesting information, one way or the other, but very important in the short term. So I'll get that.
Thanks, Troy.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, it's exciting. We've been fighting for this for quite a while, so I'm looking forward to it, even if it has to be a virtual, but I'm hoping it's not going to be a virtual ribbon cutting. So we'll see. Yeah. Anything else, Karen?
No, I'm going to turn it over to Carson, and he's going to talk about the ACT conference and the Bike to Work Day status update.
All right.
I think he's going to talk about the RTD Accountability Committee first. And, you know, I sent you that list when it came out, so there's probably not much to talk about on this. Just to let you know that Julie Mullica, who's a North Glen City Council member and the chair of NADA, got put onto that RTD Accountability Committee. You've got anything to say about that, Troy? Are you happy about it, sad about it? What's the deal?
Well, deal is the appropriate term. This was a deal we had to strike to avoid something much more expensive and onerous. You know, there's a few on the board that are not happy about it, and you know, some of us feel very strongly that our oversight committee is the same as the governors and the legislators, and that's the voter. But obviously, that wasn't going to go away. So this was a deal struck, and we worked with the legislative leaders. And supposedly the committee is going to meet, well, they were to meet still this month. So we'll see if they can get all those folks together. There's 2 ex officio members from the RTD board that, and that's never mentioned. So I don't know how big of a role we'll have, but it's Lynn Geisinger and myself as chair and co-chair of the Governmental Affairs Committee. So we'll be sitting in on all those meetings. There is a $200,000 expenditure which RTD has to pay, which is not sitting well with some of us, but it is what it is, and we have to proceed. So a lot of that is money to reimburse time and equipment and perhaps consultants through Dr. Cog, who will be the coordinating agency of the advisory committee. So, say what you want. It's the deal that we struck, and we'll get through it. And hopefully there's something very usable and valuable for everybody involved when it's all said and done.
Hey, Troy, this is Kyle. What authority or power does this accountability have?
So, and Carson or Karen, you may remember more of the details, but they have, the committee has to file 2 reports, I think one at year end and one in the summer of next year. All of their recommendations and guidelines need to be addressed by the RTD board and management. So it won't be something that's in a 3-ring binder and put on a shelf. We have to answer why we do what we do, or how we do things, or how we could facilitate recommendations that they give to us. So I don't know if it's what I would call binding, but there certainly will be accountability mechanisms that we'll have to address as board and management of RTD as we move through the process. Karen, Carson, if you have anything to add to that, please do so.
I remember it like that as well, that this group will look at mainly the financial aspects of RTD, some of the policy issues that have to do with equality for writers, those kinds of things. And I think they're going to have a very robust meeting schedule as well, that they're going to meet quite frequently and come up with these recommendations. And then you'll have to address them in some manner. It's probably like an audit in many ways, where an auditor comes in, looks at the state of the organization, and then comes up with these recommendations, and you have to agree to the recommendations, but also say what you believe you've done or will do in order to, make the recommendation, make the recommendations into your policies. So it's interesting, and I know this is part of it, but it's interesting because RTD is looking for a general manager, and you're in the midst of all of that as well, Troy. Looking at candidates who put their name in, you had quite a number of candidates, and you're in the process as well. So as this accountability committee is moving forward, so is RTD moving forward in getting a permanent general manager. It's a lot of balls in the air right now.
You're muted, Troy.
Yep, and add to that, we are in the midst of a state audit, which happens periodically. And there's, I think, a $400,000 tab on that we're having to do. So it's ironic that the state audit is happening at the same time that this accountability. So hopefully there's some usage and cross-pollination there that keeps the cost down. But yeah, it's extremely busy time. All the Tuesday nights that we had scheduled off are completely booked. We've had lots of budget meetings. Ad hoc committee, I served on that, on code of conduct. We had 6 meetings dealing with the public and some of the homeless issues. We're all swamped, and But, and then, you know, add to that COVID and doing our best to protect our drivers. It's kind of crazy, but it is what it is, like I said before. And, you know, I know those of you like Joyce and Jessica are dealing with those kind of weird situations in your governance roles as well. So, yeah, that you don't want to figure up your hourly rate right now with that vivacious $1,000 a month budget we have. So, but it's okay. It's all good.
So Troy, I do have a question. How do you feel? I mean, I think, you know, because I'm part of the Reimagine as well as Jessica for the
Yeah.
RTD committee. And it seems like one of the two are redundant. I mean, you know, I don't even know why we're still doing Reimagine at this point. You know, because looking at what this accountability group
Yeah.
is going to be doing, I'm just kind of wondering about your
Well,
take on this.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a strange storm with timing issues on that. One of the things that was talked about is, you know, how do we maybe move Reimagine to a slightly different role in helping with COVID and routes and all that. So I think, you know, we want to keep the group together because we have expertise and more diverse expertise, you know, on Reimagine, both technical and advisory than we actually will do on the accountability committee. So I hope we can work together. But, you know, if we get to the point where it's tremendously redundant and we don't have the staff bandwidth to handle all of these things, because, you know, this accountability committee is going to take up a lot of staff time on finance and operations. And we're pretty busy with, you know, COVID and budget amendments that just come flying at us. You know, we may take a hiatus on Reimagine, but we haven't had a long discussion on that. But we're open to that. You know, I had a time with Jessica to talk about the last meeting, and, you know, the last meeting moved a little bit to a lecture and a report and not too much give and take, which is extremely frustrating for some of my fellow members of that. And I'm aware of that. And I know you guys, some of you may be talking about that tomorrow at NADA, and I'll try and be on that as well. It's something that needs to be addressed. We don't want to waste anybody's time. So, you know, I appreciate, you know, Jessica and Joyce, your input tomorrow with Mr. Ballard and others that might be on that call. Because, yeah, we've got to make sure our time is spent wisely. And, you know, one of the things, and I'll end soon, I promise, Karen, one of the things that, you know, happened at Reimagine RTD, and Jessica and I talked about, is there was a kind of a lengthy discussion about examples of places where we could trim, where we're concerned about redundancies and log jams, if you will,
Right.
in the system. And there was no mention of North at all. Really nothing with A or G lines. And I know that frustrated Jessica. And I told Jessica the next day, I said, oh gosh, don't worry about that. We don't want to be on that list. Because if you're on that list, you know, you're looking at duplications and trimming, and we don't have anything to trim, for Pete's sake. So I guess I don't panic as much about that. But yeah, we need to continue to make sure the North is recognized. And if things get strange with, you know, the flex ride, especially the one and somewhat to Kyle's points, you know, that thing's working pretty well up north, and we need to defend that one all the way home. And I know Vince and I certainly will. I think the staff is fairly supportive of it. I don't think that there's a threat, Kyle, to that.
Good.
You know, especially if we see some retail pickup, which, you know, we're going to get a little of that. So yeah, it's interesting with Reimagine. We're going to have to take it, you know, a month by month look at that. I just don't want to lose our input from the diversity on that committee because it's important. And we need the North area backstops like Joyce and Jessica and a few others to make sure. We've talked and defended the inline a lot. So inline has been discussed, and to the point of at times I say, all right, enough on the inline. It's coming out. We got the votes, but there's been a couple, well, maybe we shouldn't open it. Well, baloney. And that went nowhere. That was just a couple of board members that aren't involved with the inline. So I'm, kind of rationing my time in defending the North in a way that doesn't perturb, those that have helped us. So, man, and I apologize for the lengthy speech there. I'll go to mute where I belong.
Well, Troy, I really appreciate your update. And I know as well as Jessica does that if they even considered not opening the end line, we would have a revolt up in this area. I mean, oh my gosh, that would be, it would be ugly. I know it would be.
I don't want to mislead you that there was a.
No, I'm not.
but there was one that kind of, and she's got her own agenda.
Right.
But there was not much support for that, and sure as heck not much support from Ballard and the management.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It's Jessica. I just want to come in really quickly and say, I don't think that obviously we all want the end line. We've been fighting that for a while, but some of the concerning things that I heard in that meeting were things like, well, maybe we need to change the 3-hour single-use ticket to 4 hours because it's going to be longer delays when we talked about the South. And so my issue with not bringing up the North is not that our cuts are going to happen up North, but how is that going to impact us once we do eventually have service? And that's where I feel like we don't ever get considered because, it is a 30-mile trip like we saw on the 120. So if we're now talking about changes in the routes down south, that's going to only impact the routes up north even further, but there's again no mention of that. And that's where I start getting frustrated with just the lack of conversation. And that's the part where I'm like, it's not just the end line, it's the whole trip time in general.
No, and you're right, but the good news is that same issue for us going north is an issue to folks going west to Arvada. And
Right.
And then maybe even the bus rapid transit to Boulder. So when you start putting those two regions kind of in with us, there's enough firepower to advance that conversation. And I think your comments tomorrow will be very helpful. And it's good for Julie to weigh in on that since she's on accountability too.
Well, yeah, and also Elise Jones weighed in on that last week a little bit. So, and even Highway 7. I mean, I think tomorrow I'll be less frustrated than I was last week because Reimagine just makes my blood boil when we sit through those meetings. It's a little different. I've had a week to think about it now.
That's true. Okay.
Thank you all. I've got to run to my real job board meeting, so that'll shorten your meeting for sure. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thanks, Troy.
Thanks, Troy.
Okay. Carson, did you want to move forward with the ACT conference?
Sure. If we think our discussion has wrapped up there, I'll keep it short. Just a short update. So there was some discussion earlier when Denver was going to be the host of the ACT International Conference of maybe some of you guys joining in person or going to some events here or there, pick or choose. So just want to update you on what that's going to look like now. It's going to be August 3rd through 5th, but it's going to be all online with a pretty unique platform. It's similar to Zoom, but with some breakout rooms. It should be pretty interesting. If you're interested in joining, the non-member registration price honestly is pretty low for all 3 days. It's $295 for the whole conference with recorded sessions you can watch later. Some of the important ones that we'll be kind of tuning into, Tammy and I and our other colleague, Catherine. Tamika Butler is going to present on how the pandemic and civil unrest should forever change transportation, kind of the things that should come out of COVID and social justice changes that are happening across the country right now. And then there'll be another keynote the next day from Joseph Kopser, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but better upward mobility through better ground mobility. Just talking about how transportation mobility is good for economic mobility on a personal level. And there's some good example panels you can see on the screen, something like comparing transportation at two Colorado universities, CSU and CU. Are going to present a panel on how they're working with micromobility providers to help get their students around campus effectively. And there's some others there that I just listed as an example, but there's a full schedule on their website. Happy to send that out later. If anybody has any interest in looking at those, please let me know and I'll send you the full schedule. Is there any questions on the ACT conference before I move to Bike to Work Day? Great. So Bike to Work Day, as you all can imagine, was pushed from June until September, and now there is a lot of continued uncertainty around that. DRCOG has promised to make a decision by August the 1st, but we anticipate it maybe being a little bit sooner about whether that will be an in-person event or a virtual only type event where they just encourage people to go bike on their own to maybe specific locations or things like that. I anticipate it will move to virtual only based on recommendations from CDPHE and City and County of Denver Health Department that Bike to Work Day is working with. Obviously, those big stations downtown are presenting somewhat of a challenge for people that are gathering in one area. So they don't want to encourage people doing that right now, but they do want to encourage people biking. So I think there's some movement around doing a virtual event, maybe with some scavenger hunts with people on their own biking safely, because it's a great time to get out and do it. There's less cars on the road, so we're trying to encourage people to do that. And if any of you have any wonderful ideas or you've seen anything cool out there about biking, please shoot them our way, and I'll share them with DRCOG as they try to kind of reimagine Bike to Work Day this year. So watch out for that. It should be coming down the pike here in just a few days. And I'll take any questions if you have them.
Questions? No? All right, Karen.
It, Carson,
That's all I've got. Tried to keep it short.
I think we were just going to mention that we're not doing a lot of public outreach. The outreach that we're doing really is in our subcommittees that we all belong to. Carson belongs to a number of committees on DRCOG, some policy committees, and Tammy is doing our State Highway 7 coalition meetings. And we'll have some updates on those kinds of things for you next month. I also have an issue on I-25 and State Highway 7 Mobility Hub that I'll bring to the board next month. I'm hoping that there's some movement on some of the challenges that we're anticipating at CDOT, and I'm anticipating as a representative of this area that's causing some delays and some reduction of funding that will really affect our area significantly. So working behind the scenes to try and do the best we can do to protect those projects and the amount of stakeholder input through the years that have been given to those projects and that are now being looked at it being cut drastically. And then
yeah, Karen, on that one, obviously that's, sorry, this is Kyle. Obviously that's near and dear. So if maybe offline, if there's a possibility to have a follow-up conversation with you on that, that would be helpful.
I'd love to do that. I'm meeting with Broomfield City Manager Jennifer Hoffman and Mary Pat Quinn tomorrow to talk about this. I talked to Pat quite a bit about this. I looked back and Gene Putman, if he's still on here, he'll remember this, but you know, in 2014, we did a PEL, Planning Environmental Linkage Study, for I-25 that had a number of investments for improvements. And the new management at CDOT wants to throw that out and reduce all of those and change some things. And I looked at who was on that, and Jean was on there, and I was on there, Jean Shreve was on there, Eric Hansen was on there, Pat Quinn was on there, Nancy McNally was on there. Almost everybody at CDOT has already retired or moved on to something else. So we don't have any of the CDOT champions on there that we had before. I think we're going to have to, and I'll call you, Kyle, but I think we're going to have to come up with another angry group. That's all I can say. To come in front of the Transportation Commission and make the case that this important improvement between 36 and beyond Highway 7, just up to Highway 7, hasn't had any significant improvement, while projects to the north and south of us have tons of money poured into them, and we've got safety issues and all that. And I've talked at length to Jessica. Jessica's last week, Jessica called me with her annoyance on Reimagine, and I said, "You want to be annoyed about something else? Here's something else to be annoyed about." So, you know, we were like two angry women all last week, thinking about, wait a minute, we feel like we're not being heard. We feel like we're invisible up here. So I'll give you a call after I talk to, it'll probably be Friday, Kyle, after I have the meeting with Jennifer. And
Okay,
Pat,
thank
and
you.
I'm fully prepared to start working on the angry crowd. I've already spoken with our mayor about it. So as soon as you give me the green light on that, I will start engaging.
Well,
Thanks, Jessica.
great. So I want to come up with this strategy. One of the things that used to frustrate me as mayor was when people would come up to us and they would say, "I don't like how you're doing something, and you guys stink, and you don't have forethought, and I'm never going to reelect you, and I don't know why I voted for you in the first place." And then you'd go away feeling kind of bitter. But if someone came up to you and said, "You know what, I think you guys need to rethink this, and here's some things I think would be helpful, and please take into consideration these suggested," it was a much more positive approach. And also sometimes people came up with some pretty interesting things that could in fact be included in a plan, or a plan could be tweaked to incorporate that, or you could evaluate it and say, "Great idea, but here's the downside to that." So I'm hoping that before we have the angry crowd, that we have a game plan and a strategy to say, this is important because, and here's how we think you can tackle this challenge. So
Karen, as always, let AC Rep know how we can support you, whether it's an angry group or working with you to put together a strategic plan and framework around how we move our region forward as it relates to transportation and mobility. We know it's always been a challenge. We continue to get the crumbs, not a bigger piece of the pie. So
yeah,
we want to make sure that we're engaged with you now and going forward. I mean, we had a great webinar with Dr. Richard Florida last week, and one of the big things that we talked about was the push and pull between urban and suburban, and I think suburban is back in, and so I think we need to really push forward and continue to educate and inform people on all the great things that are happening in our region, but as well as those yet to come.
Oh, that's great. Oh, and you've always been a great advocate for transportation as connected to economic vitality, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And so give me a little bit of time to work through this, but I think we then get everybody together that are stakeholders for this, and put together a strategy that we can come as a united force and try to change the trajectory of what I see is happening at our management in CDOT in an effort to reduce costs to their budget, but to the detriment of us. So, yeah,
Karen, I would just mention one other thing. We did get our zoning amendment approved last week, and that adds an additional 3,000 residential units. So that's a big deal. I've seen a number of transactions in and around this I-25 Highway 7 intersection, so additional development is going to be coming in this area. And residents are repeatedly voicing their concerns about the traffic in and around Highway 7 and I-25. So I love the idea of having the engaged and productive crowd initially, see how much we can get done there. But there, I think the iron is hot relative to whether it's even engaging other HOAs and other groups. Certainly, I would be amazed if you didn't have full support from Jennifer and Kevin and Mayor Quinn right now about
Yeah.
ensuring that we get more than just the crumbs.
And that's great. I think we've just been anticipating that what we saw in a plan would eventually get built. And now not only will it not anticipated to get built the way we envisioned it, but a drastic reduction in what we need to happen up there to make that interchange work and to eliminate the safety issues or reduce the safety issues that we have on that segment 2 from 84th to Thornton Parkway. And those are big issues for us. And I get a little frustrated because I believe that people making those decisions don't drive this section, they don't know this section, and they think we're asking for something that's unreasonable. And I've also heard that the consultants who did all the work their consulting prowess questioned.
Huh.
So it's really pretty frustrating across the board. So
Karen,
anyway, that's for next month.
Okay, and just curious about this conversation. Have you heard anything from the county commissioners on this at all? Or are they part of this conversation?
They haven't been part of the conversation. This has been an internal conversation at CDOT. And if you remember, we were going to have CDOT come to NADA tomorrow and talk about two things. That was the environmental assessment from 84th that got pulled. And then there's an effort to put a master credit agreement with a TIFIA loan for the full corridor from segment 2, where it starts at 36 all the way up to Fort Collins and Loveland, and use the revenue to fix things along the corridor. And that's the conversation I've been having about making sure that the 84th project and the mobility hub are in that TIFIA loan if we are going after a master corridors TIFIA loan. And that's the challenge at this point, is making the case that if you're making improvements on this corridor and using the revenue that's already being generated on segment 2 and 3, that money can't go up to the north to pay for their improvements, where they've had a very robust amount of funding put into Loveland and Fort Collins. And I understand that it's necessary up there as well, but the problem for I-25 is within the state, people on the commission believe there's been a lot of money invested in I-25, and at some point you can't go back to the trough and ask for more money on I-25, because people outside of the Denver metro region believe, that I-25 is being taken care of. But there's only segments of I-25 that are being taken care of. So,
Right.
yeah. So when you have 11 people throughout the state making a policy decision, and money's already been allocated in robust amount, a big amount north and south of us, the GAP project, and then everything north at Loveland and Fort Collins. To say one more time, wait a minute, there's a section between here that needs to be improved, and the number is X, or X times 10. They're like, we've already put a lot of money into I-25, let's make sure we put money elsewhere. So that's kind of where we're at today with the conversation, but I'm hoping within the next month, we'll have enough to talk to you guys about. And meanwhile, I'll reach out to Bo and to Jessica and to Kyle.
And Karen, we have the Highway 7 meeting this Friday. Are we going to have any updates on that there, or is that going to even be a topic?
No, it's probably not going to be a topic. I've been asked not to bring up the TIFIA master agreement yet because it's only being floated at the TIFI level, and it may get turned down. They may say, you know, you can't possibly have this much money in this loan. And then it's a moot point, right? We're not going to argue it because no one's going to get it. But if in fact it moves forward, I should know by next month, early in the month, whether or not this is something HPT is going to pursue, and that's when we need to intervene. So I saw the agenda for Highway 7, and it looks like the only thing they're going to talk about is the IT for Mobility Hub, $10 million, and that's already it's already in the budget, and that's for design. The one thing is, you know, if they're designing for a mobility hub or an intersection that's at 150 million or 200 million, when we really need 300 million, that's where we can speak about that.
Aaron, one of the big things we talked about was, you know, here in our region, we tend to do things on shoestring budgets. And when you think about Denver South, they're very
Yes.
well organized, including their regional economic development organization, which includes a transportation management organization such as yours. So we really need to pick up the talk about how we look at generating some ongoing revenue streams, so that way we can have a bigger voice and fill those gaps when funding is needed. And so I know I've been talking to you about this for years and vice versa. And so I think now's the time to really start pushing this. And so whether it's a business tax receipt, whether it's, you know, Metro District, whether it's a mill, there's something that we got to do to really push our agenda forward. I mean, because we're trying to be proactive, right? We're trying to stay ahead of all this growth and development that's going to happen in our region now and going forward. And so with that, I just think that as we go through a strategic planning process for AC Rep in the region, obviously we want you all to be at the table, because we know when it comes to business development, whether you're an existing business or a business yet to come, transportation and mobility are one of the top issues that they talk about all the time.
Yep. And you know, we evaluated and analyzed that kind of thing a couple of years ago, and it didn't go anywhere. Remember, Kyle, we had meetings with you and with Jonathan Perlmutter and others. It just didn't have the traction it should have, and had done it, you know, we'd be 5 or 6 years into it now, and we'd be getting some revenue out of it, and we could use that as local match. And so, Bo, I think the time has come absolutely to reevaluate that and talk about it. And you know, I think Bromfield's idea of TVA, what was that? Transportation value added initiative. You know, maybe something. I know Jennifer was really involved in that. Maybe that's something to discuss again. But I think the issue is, if we're looking at CDOT for 10 years out, and we're not on their 10-year plan with no hope of getting funding, something's going to happen to that intersection that has to be improved. Once you make Band-Aid improvements, then it gets off the list of critical need, and it'll be another 10 years after that before, and by then you've missed the opportunity to do something that's significant there. So we've got to think about how to tackle this and how to put that in the forefront. And so all of you great minds will get a call put together, and we'll start talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess.
So Karen, let me ask you this, if I could. This sort of triggers another ongoing initiative that I think Smart Commute has helped to kickstart, and that is the data initiative. I know I kind of bring it up most meetings, and that was one of the concerns, is that we were not getting good data, which is indicative of all the development that's going on in the north area. So I would assume that data should be part of this discussion, and maybe it's a way of asking you and Tammy, perhaps, you know, how are we doing on that initiative, and is it starting to bear fruit?
Yeah, Tammy is the one who's been heading that up. Tammy, are still on?
Yeah, I'm still on. Yeah, they are definitely making headway, and yeah, we have had an impact on that, Kyle, a good impact. They just, I think it was last month, they've switched to the city level. They were at the county basis for testing. Now they're at the city, and they've got, I know for a fact, Kent for Thornton and Deborah with Westminster is involved in the initial input on that because they're on part of the data committee on reviewing the city basis. To give you an idea, before they were only allowed to really involve like 5 zoning things because there's so many different types of zoning. That was a big issue. Now, when I talked to Andy last month, they were at 14 that they were able to incorporate into the model. So that has drastically expanded that. And before, to give you an idea of like multi-housing and stuff, they were looking at like 6,000 units in just the 144th and I-25 area. And at their last count, they were at like, I think it's been a while. I think they were at like 60,000 is what they were looking. So, and more than just the 144th area. So, and part of that's due to the zoning. And now they're actually able to incorporate into that model at, say if it's a farm now, and they're looking at taking that farm's gonna go away and it be used for industrial or something else, they're able to incorporate that into the model as well because they have a lot more leeway on being able to change the code on how it's written and how it accepts data. So it's a constant tweaking method and they're learning and changing it every day. But just alone, that was a direct impact of our community. And I am, since I'm on the State Highway 7 Coalition and TAC, we might be able to use my influence and connection with the data committee to try to get some numbers out of that for that as well.
Well, that's encouraging, Tammy, to hear that influence and impact is actually occurring. Do you have a sense of, is data happening here and politics on the mobility hub is over here? Has there been any ability to join the two if in fact the data suggests that the need for the mobility hub is there or is going to be there based upon all these developments that are happening? How can we marry those two if they're not currently being married?
So part of the issue for us, of course, is that we have advocates on CDOT staff at the planning level, and Andy Stratton and Paul DeSitis and others who work in that arena all the time are advocates for what we'd like to have. It's at upper management where we have to make a better argument, I think, to her of the importance of this. What she said to me is there are things you want, things you need, and what you want isn't what you need. And if I have to make decisions on where I'm going to put money, I'm not going to give you what you want necessarily, but I will give you what you need. And when you talk about what you need, often that means improvements to an existing system in order to get it through a 10-year period, instead of making significant improvements that look to the future to keep that a viable intersection. And so I think anytime we have data that we can use to support our arguments, the arguments become stronger and harder to dismiss. And so I think that's part of the strategy, is making sure that we have current numbers and that Dr. Cog we don't have the, I think we don't have the clout behind us to just anecdotally give them this information. And that's what she was looking at, was some of the anecdotal assumptions that were made 6 years ago, and things have changed drastically up in our area in 6 years. You know, there was kind of a quiet time when a lot of the development didn't happen. You know, the whole IKEA thing didn't happen, and your development had a slower start than what we anticipated in 2014. But things are really happening up there, and you look at what's happening on Highway 7 east of I-25. And then west of I-25 in Erie and in your development area, if we have data that has the reputation of Dr. Cog behind it, we'll have a better argument, a stronger argument that's harder to dismiss, I think. So, I mean, you're right on point. It'll be a fight.
Is the she you're referring to Shoshana?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And ours isn't the only one she's interfered in. It's her management style. It's a little different than management style
So
we've
I
had in
hear.
the past.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, that's all we've got, I think, unless anybody else has something to add.
All right. Is there any other comments from the board?
Sorry, this last thing, maybe on the next meeting, just an update on that initiative we were talking to relative to bike lanes, and just sort of getting the map that shows how everything's stitched together and where the holes are. If there's been any progress on that, that'd be great.
We can tell you there hasn't been any progress on that up till now. I think we did some preliminary evaluation, but it's really taken a backseat to some of the other things we've had to respond to.
That makes sense. That's fair.
Yeah, but we'll have a staff meeting on Friday. We'll talk about what we can do as logical next steps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. And it was really a very good meeting. I really appreciate all the input, and I will see you next month. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, Joyce.
Safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Carson.